Episode 15 on the Holocene podcast. In today's episode, we're with Jonathan Butler, who is a rapid transformational therapist, or for short, RTT. RTT therapy is a very powerful tool, and in this episode, we go into why you should consider utilizing such a tool for your own personal growth, self discovery, and even in some cases, healing. It can be life changing. I hope you enjoy the episode. Jonathan goes really deep into kind of all of the benefits of RTT. And as usual, if you find this content of interest or helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. And I hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks for joining me. How are you doing today? All right?
I'm good, Jay. Thank you. Looking forward to today. Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. So, Jonathan, what was it that got you into RTT therapy initially?
Okay. Yeah. So, well, really, it was. I was on the other side of the fence. Effectively, I was one of those people in that place where I was really stuck. I was having a lot of issues. I didn't know how to get out of them. I tried all the obvious traditional things, and my partner at the time said to me, "Go and try this," and I was like, "You're having a bit of a laugh, aren't you? Hypnosis, hypnotherapy. That's not, that's not me. That's not the kind of thing that I do." And I gave it a go, and it sounds kind of a bit cliched, but it really was quite a life-changing thing for me. Really, really quickly, I went in and did a session with somebody about anxiety, actually, about sort of getting in a place where I was stuck and just kind of I was in that fear mode, and I wanted to get out of it. And I remember coming out of that session and just actually having clarity, seeing what I needed to do, having got my confidence back, all of those things. And then, so that was, I came into it, and then I found out it could do lots of other things for me as well. And then I went through that, okay, I want to do something different with my life. And then probably took me 2 years from discovering RTT to going, actually, I think I'd like to do that myself. So I decided to retrain and be an RTT therapist. And I was one of the first people that Marissa Peer, who's the founder, trained to do it. And being me, I like to sort of, I don't do things generally half measures. I decided to go into it full time as my thing from day one, and I've been doing it ever since. So yeah, so here I am today. And then now, so RTT is a core part of what I do. I do coaching as well alongside of that, but actually I kind of combine the two things because I think that's quite a powerful combination as well, Jay.
Perfect. So what sort of differs from RTT and like your traditional hypnotherapy, or even actually another side would be your traditional therapy as well?
Yeah. Okay. So if I start with the sort of traditional therapy, I mean, typically the kind of things that, most of us will do, if there's something going on, whatever it is, we're anxious, we're stressed, and things like that. We'll go to the doctor, and usually they'll either, depending on the doctor, usually they'll either prescribe you some medication, antidepressants, sleeping tablets, anti-anxiety things, or they'll send you to counselling, talking therapy, or CBT, those kind of things. And so the whole drug thing, that's a whole different conversation for another day. But in terms of the talking therapies, what I found personally, and when I kind of look at the science I like to study the science, what I see is that those kind of counselling, talking therapies are really helpful for people to kind of understand what's going on for them, understand why you do what you do. And it's good to be able to share things. You've got often hold things in to be able to talk to somebody about it. But what I typically find is a lot of people find they get an understanding of what's going on, but it doesn't actually help them fix what's going on. And so in some ways it can actually make it even worse, that you know what the problem is, but you can't do anything about it. And the reason behind that is that, we have our two minds, our conscious mind, our subconscious mind. In that typical sort of counselling, talking therapy kind of thing, you're trying to deal with your problems at a rational level. You're trying to go, well, you don't need to think that way. Everything's good now. And you hear that, but you don't really believe it. Whereas hypnosis, hypnotherapies in its various guises, work on dealing with your emotional mind. And as we know, and maybe we know in our our lives, our relationships, emotions are usually stronger than logic, or always stronger than logic. So unless you can deal with the emotional, subconscious thoughts, feelings you've got about yourself, you can't really make changes, because your mind never really believes you. You can tell yourself you're good enough and you can do that, but if deep down in your subconscious you've been conditioned to believe something different, all the talking in the world, in my experience, my opinion, isn't going to change that. So hypnosis as a vehicle is really powerful for getting you to take on board new thoughts. And then RTT versus traditional hypnotherapy, if you like, and it's a bit hypnotherapy is quite a broad church, right? There are lots of different approaches and lots of different schools, and they will all do things in a slightly different way. So it is quite hard to generalize, but really what you think of with traditional hypnotherapy is you go along to somebody for an appointment for maybe an hour, and you tell them what you want. They'll hypnotize you, and they will give you suggestions about how you want to think, how you want to feel, maybe to deal with smoking or drinking, or whatever it is. And that is quite powerful. That is, that can be quite powerful. But in my experience, for a lot of things, particularly complex things, that isn't enough, because coming back to that thing again about while they're working at the subconscious level, your mind still needs, if you've got deep anxiety, deep trauma in the past going on, your mind needs a bit more reassurance than just being told stuff, even when you're in a receptive state. So what RTT does is basically, it's a more comprehensive approach to hypnotherapy, which includes that sort of classic hypnosis, but also has differences, and it's more comprehensive. The key difference is that RTT always works on the basis of whatever the symptom is. If you come to me for a panic attack or a phobia or a fear, of course we're going to deal with that. That's a symptom. What we need to do is deal with the root cause. Okay, because if you only deal with a symptom, quite often the problem will kind of pop up in some other way, because you haven't really dealt with it. It's like whack-a-mole. You make that go away and it will come up somewhere else. So what we do in RTT is we do longer sessions, and there are kind of three phases, which is, one is the going to the root cause, which is basically doing regression, which sounds kind of scary, but really it's just taking you back to some memories earlier in life. It's nearly always earlier in life, usually childhood, not always, but normally, where you remember where these feelings all started. And of course those feelings lead to beliefs, which leads to actions, habits, inactions. And then, so we do that. Let's understand the root cause, because you can't fix the problem unless you really understand what's going on. It's a bit like, if you've got a car and something keeps blowing a fuse, you can't just keep changing the fuse or putting a bigger fuse in. You've got to go, actually, where in the wiring is this playing up? So we do that root cause analysis, and then we go into reframing to go, actually, you can let go of that by basically making your mind, making your nervous system feel safe. So, and then we go into that final part, which is the classic hypnosis of telling people what it is they want to think and feel, but you're doing that on the basis of already of really working out what the problem is, not just guessing what the problem is, or not just taking people's word for it, because this is unless you do that root cause analysis, you can't really be sure what the problem is. And quite often people are wrong about what the root cause is, when they've done lots of therapy. So for example, I had a guy a few years ago who'd been in the military. He'd been in Afghanistan, and he was in charge of a patrol that went out. Their Land Rover got blown up by a landmine. Lots of, there was, as you can imagine, there lots of bad things happened, of trauma, and the guy involved came to me. It was probably a year or so after this. He was out of the military by then. His service had ended, but he was just really struggling to get started doing anything in life. Just couldn't get motivated, couldn't do the things he needed to do to get his business going. And he'd seen lots of people, and everyone has said, you've got PTSD. You've got PTSD because of what's happened to you. And that's pretty logical. And when he came to me and we had a chat, I thought, yeah, the guy's got PTSD because he's been through all of this. But when we actually did our RTT session, the things he went back to were about being at school and being told that he'd been taken off the sports team, being told he'd been taken off the sports team in front of all the other kids, being told that he'd let the team down, that he wasn't good enough, and he should go and play tiddlywinks or something. And these were the memories that he came up with. And it was like, while what happened to him, seeing what happened was in the army was traumatic, actually what it actually did was re-triggered all these thoughts that he wasn't good enough, that no one trusted him, therefore why would he ever bother trying to do anything, because he always screws it up. That was the thought he had in his mind. So he got in this thing that every time he tried to start doing something, he'd procrastinate and avoid. So we did that session, and anyway, now he's in a great place. He's got his own consulting business, doing all sorts of stuff. So that's the kind of thing that sometimes RTT will do. You'd never get to that if you weren't doing that root cause analysis. So it's really interesting, some of the things that come up.
Yeah, I was warned by a hypnotherapist actually before I did a session with you, and they were saying the problem, or his belief around it, is they're going to take you back to traumatic experiences that you're going to have to reface, and sometimes it can open up Pandora's box and make things worse. But what I was quite impressed with is we didn't do that at all. What we actually did is we went back to various different situations, or different scenes or memories, and we didn't really focus too much on the trauma. We focused more on how it made me feel.
Yeah.
Then it becomes more of a feeling, and I think that we are guided a lot by feelings, and I kind of went away with it after the whole session and really kind of meditated on that specific thing, and you start to realize that various different situations can bring up the same feeling, and it's actually not as complex as, I mean, it is obviously, especially for someone like me who isn't trained, it is quite complex, but not as much as I thought it would be. And once we kind of dealt with that, I know a lot of my anxiety started to sort of melt away as well. So
no, it's I remember it well, and the thing is, it clearly, and I think that's particularly when you first, when I first started doing this, and the people I trained with, that was everyone's fear. What happens if someone goes back to something traumatic? How you, for the person, even for the therapist, particularly people who are inexperienced, how do you deal with that? So I've got sort of a couple of views on this really. One is that in terms of the way we go back to things, as you say, we do it in a way where you actually do remove people from it. You make it clear that they're not in that place. They're looking at it from the outside. I mean, there's parts within it. You remember looking at it through a perspex screen and all these kind of things. So there's a kind of way of doing that, letting people see things without feeling they're experiencing it, and that they're in control. They're in control of it. And also, people won't go back to something they don't want to go back to, or they're not ready to go back to. Their mind will just block them. So people only go back to what they're prepared to deal with. But when people do go back to things that are traumatic, it does happen, and people do cry. That's it doesn't, surprisingly, that happens less than you'd think it does. But actually, it's quite uncomfortable for them, and it's quite uncomfortable for the therapist, particularly when you're new at doing it. I'm sort of used to it now, but it's actually quite cathartic for people to let things out. And the other thing I think is really important about it, again with RTT, is the idea is you need to go back to that because it might be painful to go to it, but it's nowhere near as painful as leaving it there festering away doing what it's doing. And again, the thing about the sort of therapy, the idea is in a session we'll go to that, but you never end the session on any of that stuff. You end, you bring up the bad thing put it into a perspective and you take people forward, so it's kind of like we need to do a bit of going back, but the therapy is really aimed at going forward. Whereas, again, my opinion on this is a lot of talking therapy, you come back week after week talking about the problem. So it's like you can play. And I remember, well, actually, when I did my RTT, I was actually still seeing a counsellor at the time, and they were, they were good. It had some value to me. I remember I carried on for a little while. I think I went back and did another session. I think I'd already had one, scheduled in with a counsellor, and I went back to do that after my session of RTT. And I went from feeling really good to actually going back into this room where the guy was, basically saying, well, let's talk about the problem. And it's like, and I came out of that going, and I'm right down on the floor. And I always say to people now, don't mix up your therapies, because we're trying to take you forward. Don't go back into someone who wants to start talking about the problem again when you've already, when you hope, you should put that to bed. So, I do think, even if it's, for most people it's uncomfortable. It's very rare, even with people who've had majorly traumatic things, that it's actually that anyone gets totally freaked out by it. And I suppose probably one of the most difficult ones I've ever had was a lady who came to me, and she suspected that she'd been sexually abused as a kid. And we had the conversation. We said, are you ready to deal with that if it comes up? And that confirms what your fears are. And she said, yeah, I'm ready to deal with that. And then actually a few weeks after, she was some stuff did come up, and she was in quite a, she was really upset about it, really, because it was somebody who was quite close to her, something she found quite hard to deal with. But I spoke to her several months later, and I'm still occasionally in contact with her now. And actually, she said, no, it was really important that she did that. It was really painful because she probably wasn't quite ready to do it, but it got it out and got it dealt with, and now she's in a much better place. But the other thing, Jay, is, sorry, I'm putting lots of points here, but quite often people are worried that they're going to go back to something really traumatic. A bit like the guy in Afghanistan, where they're going to go back to something you don't want to remember, and actually they go back to something. They go, well, actually, wasn't that big a deal, really. But again, it's because it's usually childhood stuff, and it's usually more about the importance you place upon things like, your dad was away on business all the time, or you got told that you weren't good enough to be on the football team, or other kids laughed at you when you read something out in class, and so you can look at it and go, well, actually, yeah, back then that felt really awful, but now it's like, it's often the trauma. You look at it now, that people will look at it and go, well, actually, that was actually nothing really, but at the time it felt like it. So the kid who wet who wet themselves in the class, for them right then, that was the most humiliating thing ever. They look at it now and go, well, I was 4 years old, I wasn't properly trained, and the teacher wouldn't let me get a loo. Of course I peed myself in the class, not a big deal.
I was just going to take it back to the point of the lady that you mentioned. So you often find, or do you often have clients that would suspect that there was something big that happened, but maybe it was so traumatic at the time that psychologically they've blocked it out, and then you uncover it, and then it all starts pouring through? Is that a common thing?
Yeah, it is. So quite often people who say, I don't have any memories of childhood, I don't remember much, I'm not sure I'll remember anything if we do the regression. That's usually because people have blocked things out. Yeah,
it's incredible.
Maybe majorly traumatic, or actually it may have just seemed like a big deal, at the time. It really does bear. Yeah.
The load it lets off when they'd go through the trauma of having to face it again, of course, but the load it lets off, I guess it almost in some ways doesn't matter how traumatic it is, as you say, because normally these things would be when you're a child, and rationally well, you can't really rationalize things. So it could be
Yeah,
something that you look at now and think that's quite trivial, but
yeah,
back then and you know, subconsciously until now,
yeah,
it's like holding a nuclear bomb. And
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I'll give you two different stories, two different examples. So one was a guy who came to me who's um, a professor at Oxford University, and he came to, really senior guy, but he had serious imposter syndrome, and basically he'd have panic attacks before he'd have to go out on stage, and before he'd go in front of the class or in front of an audience and present. And it was totally irrational, because this guy's like the expert in his field. He said he knew it was irrational, but he couldn't understand it. And he went back to memories of being at school where he'd been asked to speak, and he'd said something stupid, and all the other kids had laughed, and the teacher had laughed at him. So actually he could look at that and go, well, that's actually ridiculous, and it's pathetic, because you know you know I recognise that I'm now a professor at Oxford, and those and no one's laughing at me anymore. People want to queue up to see me. So it was kind of like, well, quite often people that you see them kind of laughing or smiling, and it's ridiculous, and it's kind of like I'm not 4 years old in that, and I don't care if someone laughs at what I say, but then obviously you do get the ones which are really, really serious, like the one we just talked about. But again, actually, again, within a session, so an RTT session is about 2 hours, and you're maybe spending 15, 20 minutes, maybe 30 max, on this period of going back and dealing with those things. So when you do, so the key then is obviously if this is coming up, it is then about, obviously it's about how how you as the therapist deal with that. And so, for example, so someone, let's say this wasn't this particular person, but let's say was someone who'd been abused, sexually abused as a kid, for example, or physically abused. Let's say physically abused. They've been beaten up by parents, whoever it was. It's obviously going back, that's quite traumatic to remember that, and you don't want to dwell on that. But then what we do in that bit of reframing is to go, is to actually go. Obviously, this depends upon the circumstances they're in right now, but it's actually to go to that person going, well, actually, you're not 5 years old. You're not in that situation anymore. Nobody could do that to you now. And I've had people who are like, big rugby players and bodybuilders and so on, and it's kind of like you go through that thing of, could somebody do that to you now? It's like, no, they wouldn't dare, they wouldn't even try and attempt to do it, and it's that thing again about, someone did that to you as a kid, you didn't have any power, you didn't have any choice, you didn't have a voice, you couldn't stop it, you just had to deal with it, put up with it the best way you could. But as an adult now, you're not in an abusive relationship, you're not in a place that's unsafe, and if someone tried to do that to you, well, they wouldn't dare to do it. So it's just it's making sure you deal with that. That's the key thing.
Because we obviously, our lives are like linear, and if I look back, I feel like I've had multiple lives within this life. I look back when I was 20, I was thinking, I can't believe that was me. It was like it was a different person. So almost kind of separating those different people that you were. Yeah, that happened to him back then.
Yeah.
But you are this person now.
Yeah.
I think even just drawing that line could probably be quite a powerful thing.
It is. Yeah, it is. And I think that, we have phases in our life, don't we? We have phases in our life that go through, of what we do, of who we are, what our friendships are, what our relationships are, and things just do move on and change. And as you know, one of the things we typically do in a session as well is that sort of, if you had insecurities as a kid, is about bringing that kid into your world now and seeing that your life's different. So again, if you had that kid who, grew up in an environment where, parenting was bad and it was violent, and you've changed, you've got yourself in a better place in your life. It's like, you bring them into your world and see the life now. It's kind of like, And that works really well as well with people. You get a lot of people who maybe who never feel anything is good enough for them. That quite comes from kids maybe who didn't have much, or didn't have much, much expectations around them when they were younger. And you do that, bringing them into your world, particularly if you've made money or got a decent life, or whatever that means to you. You get them to see how your life is today, and it's kind of like, and that's like really powerful, making the kid feel safe, because that kid is always staying with us. So, but yeah, absolutely. We have episodes. We have episodes in life, and I think as well, Jay. We have. I think in life, we're either in fear or in growth, and you can't really be in both at the same time. You've got to get yourself out of the fear to get yourself into growth, and growth can mean different things at different times.
The sort of clients that you get, I'd imagine you get a whole array of, different clients. Who are depressed and maybe have anxiety and fears and whatnot. Maybe some people that have habits they want to sort of get rid of. People who have self-limiting beliefs, as you said, the professor with the imposter syndrome, or maybe people that self-sabotage. I'd imagine also, actually, no, I know, because you did tell me, people that have different illnesses. Because that's a route that I think people are becoming more open to. Not only more open to, I think it's becoming more obvious that there's definitely a huge, if not, some people actually believe it is the be all and end all of health, is the psyche, and sort of things like stress and trauma and holding on to subconscious psychological traumas, etc. What sort of things have you seen, without getting into people's individual, or I guess as the patient client, privacy privilege, you don't want to be sort of sharing too many details, but what kind of things have you seen that have blown your mind and reaffirmed that what you're doing is, the right thing, and it really is helping and changing people's lives?
So it's interesting for me because early on, I myself had physical issues. I had IBS, I had fibromyalgia type muscles, I had sort of mild asthma, I was getting eczema, so I was getting lots of physical things going on, and RTT, when I dialed down my anxiety doing RTT, those things, went away. They really went away. So for me, that was really interesting, and I started, and I worked with a few people. I mean, even really early on, having just trained, I remember working with somebody who was a model who every time, who was getting really bad eczema, and she got this eczema every time she was going off to do a show. Every time she'd literally leave the house, get to the airport, she'd be in the airport lounge and notice she was getting her skin was just turning. And she'd get her, she had to, and it was like, you imagine a model, it's like being a singer who loses their voice, or a therapist who loses their voice. I'm trying to keep myself hydrated. But it's that was a really interesting thing with getting to be, she came to me, and so she was actually training to be a therapist as well, and we did a session together, and she'd grown up in a very strict religious environment, big family, quite a closed off community, and she went back to a memory of when she was a kid, of being with her dad rubbing cream on her face. Okay, and we sort of went through and explored, what's that all about? And they were telling you she was one of like 12 kids. Her dad was, I can't remember what he was, but I mean, he might have been a doctor actually. And she went back to actually what happened, and obviously she never got much attention, and she was in this environment where she was very controlled, didn't fit in, and she'd run away, I think, when she was like 15, 16, to get away from all of that, what was cult-like thing. And what happened now later in life, she had a family of her own, and what happened is that every time she was going away, what we basically came back to was When she went away, she was feeling this disconnection from her family, and her skin was coming up with this eczema, as a trying to stop her going away from the family. And it was like, this thing about a dad rubbing the cream on her face was like, when you're sad and lonely, someone, I get cream rubbed on my face. So it's amazing what the mind come up with. Another one I remember was a guy came to me saying, sometimes people come with really specific things. This guy came to me with this, particularly phobias can be quite interesting. And he came to me with this thing where it's like just one thing, and that was that he would get really agitated if anybody came near his food. And particularly if his wife tried to, eat his chips off his plate, or do the thing where, I don't want a pudding, I don't want a dessert, but then they start eating part of yours. He was saying he got like really, irrationally angry about this, like really like, furious about it, almost feeling like, he couldn't control the response to that. And anyway, what came up in that was that he went back to a memory of actually being in the womb, and again, there's that thing about what's going on, what are you feeling? He's going, I feel hungry. I feel like I'm not getting enough food. And he went back to other memories of feeling hungry. And so what this was like, and it turned out that his mum was anorexic. And so, before he was even born, he was like learning that I've got to fight for food. Wow. So anybody my nutrition, and like 40 later, whatever, it's still, that was the thing. And it was like, that was really quite, that was, that was really, really quite amazing, but that was it, and the fact that he went back to his earlier memory as, and he goes back and goes, well, I'm not sure, I just feel, I can't really see anything, but I can hear things and I feel hungry. So it is quite incredible what our mind stores. But again, you think about it, you see, this stuff isn't random or weird, it's totally logical.
Because I've interviewed 2 people now on this show that talk about German new medicine. I'm not sure if that's something you've ever looked into, but essentially what you've just said about the face cream and the eczema, that is something that spoke about. And it really is this kind of when there is some sort of conflict, the body does create symptoms that are actually quite obvious. It's not that complicated when you really break it down. But I think in the modern world, we're, number one, most of the medical system just doesn't even care. So, they won't even look at the emotional side. It's just about, as you said, the drugs or go speak to someone. And secondly, I don't think most people know about it. I remember it's only recently in the last couple of years that I've actually started caring at all about how I feel. I was saying to my missus, I used to write my goals down and, plan my goals for the year. And it was all about money, where I go, what I become, what I achieve. It was I never even cared about the people that were in my life and how I felt and, anxiety. I didn't even know obviously I know anxiety exists, but I never really knew what it was until about 2 years ago, and it smacked me in the face. And it turns out I had bad anxiety, and it was only when someone told me, and I thought, oh my God, I've had it my whole life, and I just didn't even know. And I think what you find is anxiety is a symptom, firstly. So it's a symptom of something else. There's something else going on. But for me, in at least what I've looked into in my own personal experience, anxiety can cause a whole host of problems, and it needs to be addressed immediately if you're aware that you have it. Some people just kind of manage it or ignore it.
You manage it, but what I find, so for example, people who are perfectionists, and there's lots of statistics behind this. So people are perfectionists, are really driven to be perfect, to be successful, to get everything right, set high standards for themselves, people around you. But these people have got a far higher chance of having breakdowns, burnouts, and actually I ended up getting in a place where they're far from being, but they have high risk of developing things like what's it called? Losing. What's it called when you basically lose all of your energy and motivation? But it will come back to me in a minute.
Is it like fibromyalgia or?
No. It's Friday afternoon. I've had a long week, but basically, various levels of burnout and breakdown where you simply cannot function, you get tired, and so almost it takes them exactly, the thing that's driving them actually ends up being the thing that's really, 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 really hurting them. And again, with anxiety things, so the physical things, I'm a big believer, what we feel on the inside shows up on the outside. So typically when people come to me to go, I've got eczema, or I've got asthma, or I've got fibromyalgia, or I've got IBS, and IBS isn't, well, it is on the inside and the outside, but that's a different story. But typically things that show up on this part of your body, your chest, and on your skin, are usually representing of something, lots of anxiety and stress that's going on inside of it there. Because our skin is our biggest organ, and when people are ill, we say, oh, you look pale. When they look well, you say, you've got good color in your face. So our skin absolutely reflects what's going on. So I see a lot of people that come to me, oh, can you help me with my eczema? I go, yeah, I can, but let's deal with the root cause, which there may be some allergies and so on there. But again, even allergies usually are about stresses, food allergies, if you have, again, if you've got someone who's got IBS, quite often, they'll get put on diets, they'll be told not to eat gluten, don't have this, don't have that, and all of those things help, but that actually isn't the root cause. Your body is designed to tolerate these things. Something's going on that is putting your body into a hyper vigilant, hyper alert state that is making you overreact to these stimulants. You've got to deal with that, and it's usually the anxiety. So again, something like IBS is quite often about, it's quite about the mind. The mind creates things like that to stop people going out, for example. It's like, so it's all about, everything's about association. But and I do believe stress is the biggest killer, right? Because when we're in a state of high alert, our body can't repair itself. We don't sleep properly, and it's a bit like these explorers go. I guess people still do that. But, these explorers who went off to the North Pole, and when they lose fingers and toes, they don't actually lose them because of the frostbite. They actually lose these things because the body goes into a sense of shock and basically shuts down everything. Just focuses on keeping your heart and your lungs and your vital organs alive. So it's it's in hype. So basically, as you can afford to lose a toe and a finger, because that you don't need that to live. That's what stress does to you.
It's prioritizing survival.
Exactly. Yeah. So having a good complexion, well, that's gonna that can go out the window. So when you're stressed, these things show up.
I didn't realize I was in fight or flight for years. I didn't even know. And I think the time that I started to notice things was when I was just getting burnt out. You're in how long can you live in your adrenals before symptoms start showing up, and as they say, the body takes score. So you often find a lot of people can end up with like chronic pain, like back pain or neck pain. And when they actually, if you end up going to a physiotherapist, you could spend hundreds, if not thousands, doing all these sessions that don't actually really do anything because it's not the root cause, or drugs or steroids or whatever. And it's only, I looked into the John Sarno stuff. I always mention John Sarno because he was incredible. And he was healing people with debilitating back pains, and he extended his work into all sorts, even things like, chronic diseases, like, the ones that will ruin your life, multiple sclerosis and these types of things, and these degenerative diseases, and started to realize that it was these suppressed, it could have been something that happened as a child, and your whole life you've been holding it in, and it's just been building and building and building. And there's something to do with like isolation as well, feeling isolated. I think that just propels the situation. Have you had many people that have had like chronic illnesses that have come to you maybe whilst they're doing something else to get better, or come to you as, a last ditch attempt that nothing's working? And
Yeah. So various different things. Obviously, I've had fair few sort of autoimmune type of things, and there's a broad spectrum of those things. I've had people who've had motorbike accidents, who've had brain damage and lost sensations in their body. I've had a couple of people actually who are fighting cancer. Again, I don't get into saying, hey, I can cure that. But so I've been working with a lady who I think a year ago was told she had 3 months to live, and she's been doing various different things. So, and she's always tried to be healthy, and she's very open to alternative things. And she'd just been so ill with all the chemo and drugs and so on she decided she didn't want to do any more of that, because they told her she got 3 months to live anyway. So people was, well, why don't I tell you these things are going to make me feel terrible for what's left of my life? And so so she'd been doing other things at the time, like really focusing on nutrition. She'd been doing some various physios, and we'd been doing RTT together as well. There's a healing. There are speciality parts of it, if you like, for healing vortex. They deal with it. And again, and you can everyone kind of sort of form their own opinions on that. But again, the desire to live and the desire to get better and belief. And she was quite religious as well. She's American. Religion generally plays a bigger part for people over there than it does in the UK. And so her faith was important as well.
yeah.
And so again, it was like, let's remove the things, because she had some things going on about guilt, about things in her life. She had a bit of relief that I'm being punished for, I deserve this. So it's like, let's get rid of that. You don't deserve that. God wants you to be here, right?
Yeah.
And that's been really helpful, for her, right? So, so that's that's on one. I think with the motorbike accidents, so again, helping them work on regaining their short-term memory, but also helping them regain feelings within their muscles around walking and things like that as well. And seeing some quite good improvements with that. So there are things you sort of approach them and go, okay, I'm not sure where we're going to get to with this, but it's, I can't make promises around where we'll get to with that, but sometimes it's surprising what people do, people do achieve.
Do you ever find people that are like holding themselves back or shutting the door to it? They find it a bit weird, and they can't really kind of accept that a lot of these issues might be psychological, or
so generally those people aren't going to come and work with you. Generally, obviously, to do this, you need to be relatively open-minded. So it's one of my learning things was I always have a conversation with clients before I agree to work. I don't just take bookings, because I want to be sure I can help them. And also, you're spending a fair amount of energy and time with people. You want to be sure you can help them, and that you're going to be comfortable with them as well as comfortable with you. Going back a few years, I was working directly for Marissa, and they had a service where they helped people, and the actual initial intake wasn't done by me. It'd be done. They had a team of people who did the intake of people wanting to get a session. And so I had a session that was booked with me for a guy by his daughter. Okay, so this is a red flag for me when someone books something. Someone else books it for them. I want to know, do they want to do this and do they want to be there, and we need to speak first, right? But anyway, so I turned up on this session. I'd not met this guy before. We're online on Zoom. This guy was an Australian sheep farmer in the Northern Territory, I think it was. And I got on there and he didn't know what it was about. I said, why are you doing this? And he said, my daughter wants me to do it, but I think it's a load of bullshit. It's like, oh, this is going to be really good, So it's like, okay, I'll do my best. But, the guy, after sort of 10 minutes, the guy's going, it's not working. It's not going to work for me. It's just like, so yeah, you don't, that's a kind of beam me up Scotty moment. You don't want to be that.
You'd have to be incredibly close-minded, I think, to not go with it. Like if someone had some horrific disease and you say to them, oh, I can heal you by, you make a claim like that, I can heal you by going back into your childhood, they'll be like, whoa, but when you actually get that person in that hypnotic state and you really kind of, go through the motions, I'm sure most people want to be there because they can probably already see the value of
once they get to wanting to be in a session and they pay some money, obviously they want to be there. But you can only help people who are ready to be helped, Jay. That's the key thing, and again, one thing sometimes I get with people is where you speak to somebody and they go, I've tried everything, and okay, well, that's okay, you haven't tried this, but when sometimes people can talk themselves into that nothing works for me thing. Nothing works for me. They feel they've already talked themselves into a place that it won't work. And again, this is quite a rare thing, but it's amazing all the I don't know if you saw the news. I was reading something today and on the news about about this court case that's going on about these guys who self-mutilate or get people to cut off their limbs and bits of their body. And there's some weird, there's some people out there who think quite differently, who get pleasure out of body parts chopped off and filmed and put on YouTube, or not on YouTube, but on some pay-per-view thing. So, but there are people out there who actually being ill is an attention-seeking thing. I'm not saying they do it deliberately, but actually they've gone through life where getting medical attention was the only way they got attention in life, and so actually they don't really want anything to make the thing better. They do, but deep down they don't, because what they really want is company and attention. So
exactly like that. And one of the reasons that I got into researching health like I have over the years is talking to them. I'm not going to name them, and trying to help. And I'll spend hours and hours and hours reading and looking into things that they have or they've had or they're worried about or whatever. And if I ever come with any sort of solution, it's like, oh, anyway, so what have you been up to? And you're like, wow. And I've really come to that conclusion that, some people just genuinely want that for some reason, but maybe you'd understand when you go really deep into it. Maybe they only got attention from their parents when they were unwell, and that's sort of what has led to that. I don't know, but it's really strange when you meet people like that, because you can't fathom why they wouldn't want to feel great and they want to feel that way.
Yeah, no, exactly. For some people, it's just they're scared of taking a second. People have got to be ready. I remember when I first started doing this, I thought of all the people I knew. I thought this would be amazing for them, and you go and talk to them about it. But there's like, you even get to say, I'll do it for you for free, because I think it's be amazing, and they still don't. They still find a reason not to do it. And some of that may be about you're too close to them. That's a thing. But some of it's about I'm scared of doing it, or actually, some people. It's actually, it is like a condition that, I like being, they don't really like being ill, but they like the attention and the support that they get from being ill. They probably don't realize they're doing it, but, it's definitely.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's the issue. They don't realize that they like it. But this is the problem, I think, with most people. And I was this way for a long time. And this is why I want to talk about things like this. Even forgetting or leaving aside, it could heal you from whatever. I just think that self-awareness, and
Yeah.
it gives you a whole level of self-awareness that you would not have unless someone made you do it. uh, and
Absolutely.
that alone is powerful, just kind of knowing what gets you ticking. And I don't think a lot of people want to know. I think they're
Yeah, yeah,
scared to know.
yeah. And I think they are. I think usually people. It's like anything. Like it's like in business as well. I used to do turnaround change stuff, and it was always quite relatively easy to do that in organisations that recognised they had a problem. Where people were in denial or in cover up, there's a lot of that around at the moment. You could never get them to do what needed doing because they've just they're not going to admit it. They're not going to face up to it. They'll do anything to avoid dealing with it. But quite often people have to get to the point of having some bad event, being ill, having a breakdown, getting made redundant or whatever to go. I need to look at it. So sadly that is some
Yeah.
people do need to get to that place.
I think
Yeah,
sometimes your I don't know how I'd say it, your higher self or your subconscious, I don't know. Sometimes I think it can manifest these things for you to go deeper. Does that make sense? Like
yeah,
you
yeah,
often find that people who have grown, normally it starts, the story starts with a tragedy.
yeah.
So I do sometimes question, do we do these things to ourselves sometimes to give us a nudge to actually, maybe pass the test or go down that route and explore and try and learn about ourselves?
Yeah.
And the people that fail, I think the lessons come bigger and thicker and faster, and they can live sometimes a really hard life because they're just ignoring
Mm.
the very thing that's trying to help them. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's a bit far-fetched, but I
I think it's true.
genuinely
I definitely think that I know myself. When I first went into RTT, I was actually it was coming off the back of having been really ill. Not it all started with being anxious and stressed and mildly depressed and on the tablets. And but I actually got this. This was back in I don't know 2015 something like that. I been on this business trip to Japan, company trip and company conference, come back, and I felt really ill, and and it was kind of like I tried to ignore it, like we do. Um, but I got this really bad temperature, and after about a week of feeling ill, I thought this something really isn't right. Yeah, my son actually drove me to the hospital on a Sunday afternoon, and I thought, I'm wasting my, this is a bit of a waste. Felt guilty wasting the hospital time, and I got admitted, and I had some viral infection of my liver and my gallbladder, and they couldn't work out what it was. They tested me for everything, everything, hepatitis, HIV, tropical diseases, the whole shebang, right? And they couldn't work out what it was, So they were saying we don't know how to treat you because we don't know what this is, but you're really ill. I got massive temperature. I was jaundiced, and um, and eventually I was in I don't know, probably 10 days, a week, 10 days, but I was off work for about three months, and I'm absolutely convinced that it was my body telling me to stop because I was in. Um, I'll tell you offline the job I was in at the time, but it was I was working in a company where frankly it was really toxic. I was tasked with trying to change things, and nobody wanted to hear. Everyone was trying to attack you and stab you in the back. They wanted you to fail, and it was just awful. But I was too arrogant, probably, or too proud to give up on it. So I'm going to keep going. But it was just making me ill. It started off with being stressed, not sleeping well, turned into getting IBS and getting eczema and asthma, and ended up with boof, I'm going to put you in hospital. So it's definitely,
Do you know,
definitely.
without going too far into the details, I've got a friend who had that exact problem.
Mm.
Jaundice, temperature. They tested him for everything. They thought he had hepatitis, and
Yeah,
it
yeah.
turned out it was nothing.
Mm.
In the end, they couldn't figure out what it was. In for weeks in the end. And one of the things that he swears by that helped him was listening to binaural beats.
Mm.
When he was in the hospital, he spent hours, with it in his headphones. He still does it now.
Yeah.
And he said it must have been to do with anxiety that maybe he didn't know he had, or didn't know much about, how bad it could be if it's left unchecked. But he was the yellow, the jaundice. They thought all horrors, and obviously everything that the hospital or the doctors suspected it to be
Yeah.
gave him like another heart attack, and in the end he was just in a horrendous state, and it turned out that there was kind of nothing. To this day he's like, I actually don't know what it was, but he hit
Did he?
rock bottom.
So, and did that kind of, was that a turning point for him in terms of changes in his life?
Oh, massively, yeah. Still works at the same company, still in a similar position, but I think it was more a turning point in the way he views the world and the
Yeah.
way he views himself. His demeanor and his confidence levels now are through the roof, but back then he was very timid and quite fearful of things and cautious of everything and worried a lot. Completely different person now. It wasn't like a job that caused it or anything. I think it was just, I don't know, maybe his philosophy on life or the way he viewed things, or yeah, really strange. It's strange that you say that, because I literally saw that, and I actually went to the hospital to visit him when he was in this situation, and the terror was unbelievable. I even left the room like, oh my God, I can't believe what I'm witnessing. And it turned out it was nothing
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the end, or nothing that they could,
They
you know.
could find. Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. It is, your body will work out ways of doing things. And it's, it's amazing to say, it was my thing, I needed that. I'd like to have realized it sooner, but, sometimes, your body's got to go, okay, if you're not going to listen to that, you're going to listen to this. And that's a good thing, that when these things do happen, it is a time to reflect, because these things happen for a reason. And again, when you're in that stress, so it's coming back to what you were talking about earlier as well, about reappraising what matters to you, because probably like you, where I went through a long period where probably from my childhood, where for me, what success was, making money, having things, having status, having power, all of those things. And then of course, and that's what you pursue. And again, it makes a lot of sense, because again, maybe we didn't have much as a kid. Maybe in our parents' generation, that was like, what you needed was a career and climb the ladder and all those kind of things, But actually, as you go forward, you do reappraise what's important. And so I know, I'll ask you this question. When I work with people on my coaching now, when people talk about, when people talk about objectives, I always say, have balanced objectives, not just about money and acquiring things, because what really matters to you in life. But I also encourage people to think about money as currency, not as a thing in its own right. It's like, okay, someone says, I want to make X million dollars. Okay, well, what's that actually going to do for you? What's that going to give you more of that's good, and what's that going to give you less of? Because if you're just pursuing that thing, I know people who've had this thing, they've I want to have a Ferrari, and they've gone out and got a Ferrari, and after they've had it like a month, and they go, you know what? So what? Actually, I've driven it a couple of times. I quite like it, but I think I'm going to get rid of it. It's like, actually,
We're
what?
actually chasing experiences and feelings, not the thing. The Ferrari itself is kind of meaningless. If you had a Ferrari on the drive that didn't have an engine,
Yeah.
you want that, it's pointless. It's the feeling and the experience that we are chasing. So I think that's where we derive the real meaning. I was speaking to someone years ago, and they said to me, I've noticed that you always say, I think. I've never heard you say, I feel.
Mm.
And I've sort of really, thought about it. And I think it is because I was so in my mind thinking, I was never in my heart feeling. And I've noticed that years later, doing all the things I've done, I've spoke so much about on this channel of different things, and speaking with you and people like yourself, I now live more in my heart and I do feel more. And I've noticed it's actually opened me up so much. Like, I messaged one of my best mates the other day and said, "Look, I just want to say I love you, man. Like, I'm really proud of you. You've come so far." I'd never have done that before. I'd be thinking, I haven't got time for that. I'm busy, you know. Or if I watch a film, I'll allow myself to feel emotional, or a song. And sometimes I listen to music and I have a little tear run down my face just for no reason. So just kind of opening that up has been massive for me, rather than living in the head. So yeah,
Yeah,
the feelings I think is what we're really chasing,
yeah,
uh, just
feelings
whether
are
you know it or not.
because the thing is, everything starts with a feeling, so every action starts with a feeling, you know. It's like, people are anxious about things. It's because they associate it with a feeling, I've got, so, you have a feeling of anxious, which leads to, you know, a thought, which leads to an action, it leads to us doing something or not doing so. Everything does start with a feeling, and I'm a big believer as well on, about being, about trusting your gut instincts.
Yeah,
Obviously as evolution goes on, most of which is positive, but not all of it is. We lose touch with those things. You've got to be rational about everything. But generally, if you meet somebody, for example, most of us will have a thought about that person. Um, you know, quite quickly, how does that person make you feel? And and I find that is nearly always right. And quite often you'll go, no, you know, I'm going to ignore that, and I'm going to try and rationalize that, and I'll look at it and I'll change my mind. And those are nearly always the situations when you go against your gut feel, where down the line, I remember in the past when I've hired people, when my gut feel wasn't quite right,
yeah,
not right, and you hire them, and then they turn out to be a disaster, or some um, um, someone was a total fantasist. It's like, just kind of like something felt wrong, and I overrode that with my rational thinking of, everything looks like it's in line, but it's nearly always right, and it's right for a reason, because that was designed to keep us alive.
yeah.
You know
I feel
that
like
feel about,
with
should I
this,
go that way? Because you make the wrong choice, you're gonna get eaten by a dinosaur, or whatever.
yeah, the stakes are a lot higher. I
Yeah,
feel
exactly.
like a lot of things in our environment now are kind of disconnecting us from that instinct as well. Even things like Wi-Fi and phone networks and the food we're eating. It's nearly impossible to get hold of decent quality organic food nowadays. Everything's
Yeah,
manipulated and modified with chemicals and pesticides. And so when you're searching for that gut feeling, how do you know what your gut's feeling when your gut's
yeah,
always fighting? So I
yeah,
feel probably if you went and spent a couple of weeks in the woods camping or whatever, you'd probably become a lot more intuitive and in tune with those.
yeah. And that's really interesting. So it's like, this current generation in the US is the first generation that will live less than the previous generation, which is quite shocking when you think about it. And that's not down to you know that's not down to poverty, right? That's, well, there is poverty in the US. That's down to food. Bad
We're
food, too much.
plateauing as a
Yeah,
species.
yeah, and absolutely. So that's a big thing. And obviously, we've got a situation in the West where bad food is cheap, good food is expensive. And it's interesting because I'm in South America at the moment, and it's really interesting here because actually, good food is cheap, crap food is expensive. A McDonald's is more expensive than buying organic meat. Or most food here is organic. It's getting worse, unfortunately, because of the sort of outside influences. But you buy fruit and veg and meat and stuff, and it generally is, it is not processed, and it's organic.
Yeah,
Or you go to a restaurant, it isn't something that comes out of the back of a lorry that's been processed and defrosted. They've bought it from the vegetable seller who comes into town on a Monday morning and
yeah,
sells his from his orchard. So yeah, it's cheaper to eat good food here than bad food, and you don't have the same. People have a lot less money, but there are issues. You do see you know increasingly bad habits with food, but there's a lot less obesity. um,
yeah.
um, you know, um, people are more active, all of those things, you know. So yeah, that is definitely a big thing, you know. You are, you know, yeah, you are what you and some of these things, I remember Marissa Peer used to do this actually, about one of the things for RTT was weight loss, and she had this thing, and I've got a box of, I do this myself, I haven't done one for a while, like weight loss workshops. I've got a box full of foods, and I've got in this box like long life bread, donuts, crisps, Pringles, things like that. And some of these things are about 3 years old now, and they've been opened and they haven't gone mouldy.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, you know, is, you know, sugar, you know, white sugar is the only food stuff you buy that doesn't have a sell-by date, because it never goes off, you know. So you put processed white sugar in your stomach, you know, it's never going to rot. Your body, you know, your body isn't designed to deal with that, you know. And it's very, and obviously, you know, unless you're making everything yourself, you know, it's very hard to avoid these things, you know.
Oh, you have to go to premium restaurants to get, you know, you go to an expensive restaurant and it's like locally sourced beef or whatever, and you're like, this is why I don't eat out very often anymore. Firstly, I don't know what oils they cook a food in, so that worries me. And then secondly, I can buy that same locally sourced, you know, grass-fed steak or whatever for about £5.
Yeah.
I cook it how I want to cook it,
Mm-hmm.
and the potatoes are local, they're about £1. So I'm eating, you know, the sort of foods we cook now are like, you know, it costs you. I always say it to my daughter, I say that'll cost you a fortune in the shop. I've got like raw brie on sourdough bread with grass-fed butter, and like local eggs from the farm, and like outdoor raised pork, free range. And I'm like, if you go to like a decent cafe, that'll cost you £12. I've just done that for you for free.
Okay.
You know? But when you're a kid, you look at natural things and you're freaked out by it. You know, pick up an egg and it's got a feather on it. It's like, oh, or a bit of mud on it or something. But I'll let you shoot, though. I appreciate you coming on. Unless there's anything that you wanted to kind of go into more, I feel like we've really kind of done a good job here. To be fair,
a lot of things. I think, you know, so the thing is, for me, you know, it's about you know, I'm a big believer that, you know, mindset is everything, and you know, RCT is a very powerful thing. You can use for lots of things. I do also believe as well that, you know, I think for people to succeed, you know, we have to get our belief right and our mindset right. That's really, really important. So, you know, what I do is, you know, I work with RTT, but I also decided to start bringing coaching into things. I typically work with people who I've worked with on RTT as well, because I think, you know, sometimes we just need the mindset shift, but other times when we want to make big shifts in life, we need the kind of know-how as well. So, you know, I believe that to combine getting people the belief they need with giving them the mindset, giving them the know-how and the support to move forward, that's a pretty powerful combination, because most coaching, most self-help stuff ends up not going anywhere, because you know, you show people how to do something but they don't really believe they can do it. But equally, you can't just make people believe they can do something without showing them how to get there. So yeah, so no, thank you, Jay. I really appreciate the opportunity. And if anybody would like to contact me, my website is myfitmind.co.uk, and for RTT work and for my coaching, which combines both things, get on my website. I've got links for discovery calls. I've got a YouTube channel as well, which is My Fit Mind. So there's quite a lot of self-help stuff on there. I've got quite a few videos on there about not just about RTT, but about self-hypnosis, teaching people how to do self-hypnosis, which is a cool and useful skill. I think some of your viewers and listeners would get value from. So yeah, myfitmind.co.uk. myfitmind is the YouTube channel as well. So great to see you, Jay.
I'll link it all at the bottom of the show anyway, so they'll know where to find you. But no, I appreciate that. Good shout out. I know you're obviously taking on clients as well as doing the coaching, and I think it says a lot about what you do if people, you know, that you have helped want you to coach them as well, and they, you know, they must believe in what you're doing to want to learn and become a practitioner themselves as well. So I think that speaks, you know, volumes as well. But yeah, really appreciate you coming on. It's been awesome. It's been as good as I hoped it would be, and yeah, I just hope that there's a lot of value out there for people, and yeah, hopefully you pick up a few clients along the way.
Thank you, Jay. Great speaking to you. Really enjoy our conversation. We could probably talk all day. I'm going to lose my voice in about 2 minutes, so that was perfect timing. We're tuned in.
Brilliant. Thank you for that.